Ramos Street. So, mga ngalan na lang sila sa mga ngalan na ito. Hindi ay ito. Alright, this is where we have the notes that can form and structure of classic Cebuano poetry. Okay. I shrink the into 2 pages this material. So some of them are not present there. Now, maybe I give them as an example. You can add them. Para sa pamilya, I give them everything. I give everything. Or, okay, so we're familiar with organizing principles. I particularly like contrast. Right? Some contrast create drama all the time. And many times when we're doing analysis, formal analysis of poems in my class, in my literature class, I always ask my students, look out for contrasts. New and old, young and contrast in emotion, in mood. Of course, harmony is an organizing principle that you can also look into. Less common would be the use of climax and then irony or paradox. We know the difference, no? Irony and paradox? Kani, nga line. Iron bars do not a cage make. Ironic, paradoxical. Who is that? Yeah? Are you ironic or paradoxical? What's the difference between the two? Ironic, paradox. Iron bars do not a cage make. It's a paradox. When you speak of a paradox, it's something that is not, at first glance, it doesn't seem to be true. But on deeper reflection, we're not talking about physical restraint here, but some other freedom. But it can even be exercised even when you are detained somewhere. Think about that. Okay. There are 2 forms in poetry, mainly distinguished by the number of syllables within the line. Right. So Osorio and Alvarez and Villarino wrote that there is the versus de arte menor and versus arte mayor, major and minor. But it doesn't speak of, what one is more important or one is less important. But really, the number of syllables really, nakalaki. With regards to rhyme or bagay, na ay gitawag og tinaas. So the penultimate syllable, which means the second to the last syllable. Okay, ang last syllable is ultimate. Penultimate is second to the last. Also rhyme. For example, alisdanan o sinaaran. And we mentioned assonantal rhyme yesterday. So very crucial would be the vowel sounds. Ito o kinalit. Usually the accent is on the last syllable. Like tanan, hawanan. Again, the importance of having all those marks. So the number of syllables with the kinalit stress is increased by 1. So how would you read that word now? Mahimo na siya puniyan, no? Puniyan. So ilang puniyan, puniyan. So again, that will help because in the delivery of the poem, it will add another syllable, so masakto na ang sukod. Although iponi mo sa tanaw lang, dili tingali, pero exulti, makapuno usa ka syllable, masakto na ang sukod. Because of the scarcity of vowels, words where vowels before the last syllable also rhyme. So it is said yun rhymes with un, as in kagabhion and bituon. So qualify ra. Kung ano maingon sila sayon ra, magsuot og bala. Isa na pangitaon ang mga bagay, ang rhyme ba? Bagay-bagay sa bala, no? Di ba? So kita ka na, maluat na ha? Mga mo na kami bagong member sa Wila. Sige na. We have what we call as the rima perfecta, also called the double rhyme or feminine rhyme. The last two syllables of non-consecutive rhyming lines should have the same vowels and same consonants. So, if that means line 2 and 4, if it's a quatrain, non-consecutive lines man. Huh? So, pagkaalaot o kadaot. We have, ako lang siya giusa para makita natin difference, is, how would you say that, licencia? Licencia poetica or figuras de dicción. In other words, poetic license and figures of speech. But if you look at it, it's really more on how to modify the words in order, again, to qualify the number of syllables in a line ba? No? So mga modifications, we have sineresis or inusa. So instead of saying ni-ini, ni-ni na lang ka. Masabta na ka nga ni-ini na ang pasabot. No? Diaresis or binulat. So instead of lain, line. Line sa kayo, pili. So pwede ra, no? It's a license. License siya to modify. You have sinalefa or pagdugtong. You have from different words put together. So ang imo ako, mahim imo ako. So naatay na, or a contraction. No? Then you have triptongo, or 3 vowels. The first 2 vowels produce as 1. So ang tinuod diutay biya, tinuod na, pero meron ba tatag jutay, which is what we're using now. No? And then, ang intawon, may intawon. And we're using that now in FB. When you say kasi FB, mo na man no, gamitin na to. But that's actually the origin. Other privileges, you take away or add to sounds, change acts. Again, poetic license. But if you note, this is really to indicate that the poetry was produced for reading. I mean, out loud. No? Kaya mo make sense man siya ang mga line ng mga imwako kung ato na isulti na siya. No? So take away verbs or articles or invent words. So, for example, ang paraygon, may mo na siya parayigon. Kung ano sa kasyllable. You're right, sir, but we're talking about poetic license here. And so they were so concerned with putting the number of syllables correctly that they would modify it. No? And these are samples from actual poems. How they did that was their part of their creative.
That was probably one of the reasons why our Cebuanos get to be a little confusing.
Right.
Because for reasons of poetic license, you can just arbitrarily change, terminology or.
But I also would like to point out that this existed in poetry, in the poetic forms. The fiction, dili siya mo allow. So actually, it's in the fiction where I think we should consider ang kanang kuan ba ang form, correct form. Sa poetry, yeah, you're right. They had too much freedom on this arbitrary na kaya siya. But really, this is because, again, there was too much concern with measure. I-stretch. Example lang, paraygon, may marag parayigon, kay kuwang siya ko sa kasyllables, and i-stretch. But that is, again, the effect of wanting to put the correct number of syllables within the lines. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and then eventually became mainstream in the English language. So again, you're right about the arbitrariness, sir. That's why we have to look into this to understand ganong inana dahil na siya karon or ganong na inana na karon. But of course, there were academies of language then who would staunchly say the form, the word, the spelling should be like this.
What really concerned me as personal application of most of the Cebuano languages, that was probably one of the reasons why our affinity with the language diminishes. Because we change arbitrarily some characteristics of the language which is not true to the language. Atong gidugangan in English, atong gidugangan pinagsilap. It's like, kanang imuwako, it reminds me of a very distinct characteristic in the vowel of the pronunciation of the word feel, for example. With the I, with the Y sound is included in feel, it's almost like imuwako. Or na yung kung kinitsik.
You're right. Like I said, I mentioned, there were academies, language academies na they would be debating on sa okay ba nang sa poetry mong buhato na. No? Many frown upon these, but the practice was there. Yeah, the practice is there. No? And again, really, it's an effect of wanting to have the correct number of syllables, not thinking that they have actually mutilated the language. But what I'm pointing out is that it was an existing practice at the time. Just so, so mona karon, and not a lot of us actually know na ay akademikong Bisaya, no, and would subscribe to the principles that they have outlined for the language. And probably again, the clamor for study of Cebuano as a language good. But in terms of usage, writing of poetry at the time, or maybe sometimes when you write Cebuano in FB, they are happening. So that's what I'm pointing out. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Omission of in sa, as in nganong nagkatawa ka sa kalipay. Diba supposedly, nganong nagkatawa ka sa kalipay? Para makantang ng extra syllable, you want mo kas. But you have gamit og apostrophe, mo naman ay kuan, mo man ay kanang guideline unta ng apostrophe. But nowadays, we write it as KAS na lang yun. No? Not, and many do not understand it's supposed to be kasa, 2 words. So yes, exactly why this is happening now in our language. And probably the practice started then. Mausa? Mura na hope na nausal bituod ang 2 words. No? But supposedly, here you would see it as a contraction because of the apostrophe.
Currently, I'm currently studying Cebuano language as a literature major, and sa among discussion, ang Cebuano Bisaya wa jud standard. So that's why more naglain-lain spelling, lain-lain kind of words, kind of mga cast, apostrophe. Usually makita na ito sa mga paano sa mga
Super Balita is not using this apostrophe anymore. KS na rin na. So you would notice, lain-lain na may gamit, no? Like I said, there's an academic community that not many of us subscribe to what they have been outlining for us. Vowels.
I would like to share something with my classmates in NCCA, having Cebuano classes, language and literature. So we are using the pedagogic grammar of Cebuano by Dr. Angel Buserla. So we only have 3 vowels. So that's what we follow in CNU. Same with the apostrophe for contraction. So every time, maybe that is related to what Madam said on the the grammar good of language, academics good sa Cebuano language. We follow the three. So same with my thesis, so I have to transcribe the script based on the pedagogy, on teaching, and maybe because of introducing rules of grammar, because as what you have said, it's not really, inconsistent. Kung i-try ko na grammar.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like to say something?
May buntag si Marina Hamoy na nagahimo kong mga libro para sa mga bata. Dugay na ito nagsugod. Is it okay if I speak Cebuano or English? Cebuano? So, kanang accidental kuan ko, kanang naghimo o libro. Ay, ako may nagpadpad sa primerong kuan. Padpad sa Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Wa may kuan sa akong experience ba? Wa may unsalis ka ng standard. Yes, you're right. Kunya, dili sa ko kasunod sa Akademiyang Bisaya, kay dili man consistent ang ilahang mga lagda. Di ko kasunod sa kanang maagi sa CNU, kay gikan man na ni kuan Dr. John Wolf ang kang Angel Piserla. Dako kay influence ang Tagalog language sa atong kuan, atong writings. Wa joy standard in writing sa Cebuano. So akong gibuhat karon, nagkasayop-sayop ang akong mga libro, pero okay naman kay na may proseso nga akong gikuan. Gi-workshop na ko akong mga libro karon sa mga bata. Ang akong gibuhat, okay, just to make a comparison very quickly, ang atong kahimtang sa Cebuano writing karon parehas sa kuan kanang English from the 13th Chaucer's kuan time hangtod sa 17th century. Ako di ay gikan sa kang Wycliffe nga translation sa Bible. Unya hangtod sa kang Chaucer sa 17th century. So ingon ana ta karon kinahanglan ta na imong focus on the linguistic side of Cebuano, which is very weak. So ako it's very solitary akong mga paningkamot pa, pero okay ra kay kung naay mo uban ako okay ra pod, kung may mo uban ako okay ra pod, kay ang akong gisunod karon is phonemic transcription of Cebuano aron yes kay naa ang prinsipyo nga kinahanglan sundon kay aron ma-accurate ang spelling sa Cebuano. So, isang dili mahitabo karon, maybe mahitabo sa next generation. Salamat, ma'am.
If you want to check the linguistic side of Cebuano, you can check out Piserla, the name Piserla, Kilaton, Gudi. Yeah, it's not a good book ni Gudi did good. It's its own standard of Cebuano writing.
Which is what is used in Bisaya magazine. So, na-mention si Dr. John Wolf. His dissertation about is a compendium of a dictionary on the Cebuano language. And if you look at the dictionary, tinuod-tulor ang buo kang gigamit na vowels. But if you look at the dictionary produced by Sansar na ako sa kahimo nga sa Akademiyang Binisaya mo na, lain po lang ilahang gigamit, and which is what is used in Super Balita. Yeah, you have Edgar Godin, mo pa gigamit sa Bisaya. Now, so you're right, we're fluid at the moment. There's actually one being done by under sa Commission sa Wikang Filipino. But si Miss Maris nang natin sa
Yes.
Miss Maris, you'd like to say something about what you're doing now? Sorry, I have to, Mom Bella, excuse us.
About what, ma'am?
I'd like you to tell us a bit about what you're doing now, the work that you're doing now.
For the KWF.
KWF.
Okay.
By the way, ito ang SWAC, ang sa ganyan SWAC director.
Wala akong teacher.
Ano, anyway, for the current projects of the KWF Centro ng Wika at Kultura, we're actually doing some collection of translations for the K-12 texts that we were actually informed that these texts will be used for future references for books for the K-12 program. So from K1 to K-12. So we're collecting the texts and we're trying to translate them from Cebuano to Filipino to also share our own Cebuano texts to others, because especially with the drive of having regionalistic literature in the literature scene in the K-12, so they were asking us to do some translations and collections. Second is we're doing some translations for Cebuano novels. So as you can see, there are some books sold outside na translated from Cebuano to Filipino, and we're doing more projects for the translation so that we can produce more books, more translation books for the Cebuano novels. And then we are also currently doing projects, mong
Ano ba in reference to Cebuano language?
And I think the most important part is we're currently doing an orthography, standardized orthography for Cebuano language. So we are hoping that these standardization will be accepted by the Cebuano. Yes.
So, if you're translating from Cebuano to Filipino, which Cebuano orthography, and then you're having this published, which Cebuano orthography are going to use? So there must be some process first of standardizing it. All right. Thank you, Ms. Maurice. All right. Actually, we're diverting ourselves to the practice of now instead of talking about Cebuano literature during the American period. But maybe I'll give you some time, sir. You have something to say?
Really and truly, because I'm a bit concerned with respect to Ms. Hamoy, namo quote niya sa one of the materials distributed. Matod pa ni Marina Hamoy, sa linguista na nagbatid sa abroad, Wolf did not speak Cebuano. I would like to take exception to this comment, because even Mimi Rosdal, pinang mga tao na to Dennis San Carlos, for example, admired Wolf for his Cebuano. He speaks Cebuano like any native Cebuano. He married a Filipina, and he spent so many years. Ikaduha, Wolf worked through language informant. I happen to be one of the informants. And before we decided on limiting the number of vowel sounds to A, E, O, built-in among paminaw of hundreds and hundreds of footage of recorded interview from all walks of life. Gikan sa Talisa, sa Camotes, ngadto sa Surigao, sa Mindanao, Negros, tanan. Ang among mga language informants were worried from almost all over Visayas na kanang Cebuano. Aminaw, Judwin, what the difference? Ang diferensya lang ang u, matutagbuhol, matutag Surigao, kaya kanang Mulanan pananglitan ngayon sila na sabun. Ang ilang sabon, sabun. Ilang mayong tao, Pero natin sila, gibuang na nakaroon sa mga batanon nga ang kabaw, ang kabalo. Hindi mo ang kabaw, ang kabaw. Huwag kong kabaw. Ganyan na ba? Naamay ko alam, matagis na nato sa akong mga apo. Kung anong magamit magkakabaw, kabaw na na-experience sa kabaw na ay silent O. Parihan na sa night, kanang night, ang GH, dito mo i-pronounce. Kaya ako na nagkikuang kahit naroon sa misamo ito sa panet ko.
But I appreciate it that you mentioned that actually Wolf listed, I saw the introduction of Wolf's dictionary. He listed all the informants that he had consulted in making that dictionary. In my translation, I used Wolf's dictionary because of the samples he has it's valuable for knowing connotation without which appropriate word, because there are sample sentences of how words are used. But I'm not using the spelling anymore, actually. So again, that's by matter of practice. I actually,
very quickly,
I think this may be the last because I have to move on with my.
Like, let me defend myself also with in reference to what Mr. Nick Ampating said earlier about my comments were made very early on in my research, and so but I still hold true to that belief that a foreign linguist, well, yes, Dr. John Wolf has contributed greatly to Cebuano linguistics, but foreign linguists cannot completely, I guess, see an accurate phonology of our language. So there is something greatly lost in translation, and also especially in context of, I always go to the context of Tagalog was developed first before Cebuano was truly developed even until now. So there's a lot of influence that we don't even know. I'm aware that we still have a lot of work to do. So I have 3 different spellings of my own writing. And then I keep going back to number 1, number 2, number 3, and now I'm back to number 2 again. So this is the situation of our current Cebuano writing. I'm very poor. I don't have a background in Cebuano literature, that's why I'm here. And I don't want to digress from your presentation. Thank you very much.
Like I said, that would be the last, and I guess now the summarizing point there is there's so much to be done. And this is why it's good also to have this kind of forum also. But may I go back to my presentation? Thank you very much for all those insights. Okay. We will just go through now. They're actually in the notes, these points. So you have arte mayor, at most 14 syllables. But arte menor would say less than 8 or less syllables. So kung atong banaon, arte mayor would be 9 to 14 syllables. And yet there are poems that have more than 14. So again, this is Osorio and Villarino trying to whip the practice of writing poetry in shape. But can we really do that when supposedly writing poetry is a creative endeavor? And again, with the word creative, it all go beyond the guidelines of the rules. They're also all there. So the number of syllables, and then there is a precept as to where the accent should be. So you have to find a word that qualifies where the accents should be. So if it's 4th syllable or 3rd syllable, you have to find that particular word. And then 11 syllables is very common. They use having so the number of syllables is to 11 is common. In fact, they have a name for this. They call it verso endecasílabo. So there's a particular name for that kind of versing. And to have 11 syllables in all the lines in the stanza and all throughout the poem would be having it as a perfect kind of poem. So you have to help out, no? A 12-syllable line is actually 2 6-syllable syllables put together. And so on. We have 14. When we say rules for versos arte mayor, this is really the number, the stanza structure. If measure is number of syllables, this rules for versos de arte mayor is the stanza structure. So whether 2, couplet, in other words, or terza rima, 3. Particularly of terza rima is that particular rhyme scheme. The 1st and the 3rd would rhyme. And then the first, the in the second stanza, it would rhyme with the second line of the previous stanza, and so on. This is what, I believe this is what Dante Alighieri used in his Divine Comedy, Tezzari. So, ang influence sa Romance na languages. We have quartetto or quatrain, we know this. We have, Villarino has his own standard of the quatrain with a rhyme scheme. Quintetto. A special kind of quintetto called Quintetto Alejandrino that Villarino points out is actually what is used in Rizal's Mi Ultimo Adios. Sextina, Octava, Soneto, and it seems that the kind of sonnet that was influential to Cebuano literature is the Petrarcan sonnet, rather than Shakespearean sonnet. Now again, Italian, Spanish literature had more influence on us. When you say versos de arte menor, you have 8 syllables, no? Or less, right? Some would say 2, no, but I haven't seen a 2-syllable line sa mga poems, or 3. And then you're familiar with these terms, although ibinisaya, no? So here you would notice where the stress is. So you would find a word that would qualify as to the kind of stress necessary for the particular line. So pinanita ay gini word o pulong no nga haom sa requirement, sa measure, o sa structure. There also, these ones are in there. So again, the concern for correctness in structure na kanang haong din siya. By the way, again, these are from the guidelines set by Osorio and Villarino in their articles. Again, ako lang ikuan din ang naman niya. And sometimes Villarino would say, okay, sequidilla is only for satires, it's best for satires, but not any other kind of mode. Walang idiretso, okay. Kaya yung mga combinations. I will not show a sample. Wala, idiretso na. Alright, we're supposed to do poems for analysis, pero the organizers have been hankering me for a break, But when we go back, we will look at some poems that we can dissect. And then I asked a group of kiddos a while ago if they're the kind who likes to, kind of do a presentation, because we might do that as well. But in the meantime, if you have questions, you hold on to those questions. For now, please don't forget them, because we will take a short break. As a break, okay, the snacks are already ready. You know where it is. So, I guess we take some time.
Let's take a 15-minute break.
Alright, so did you find the American period? The American page? I was about to say, did you find the American page? There are a few poems there. Of course, Hikalimtan is in there. It's quite long. We'll read it through. One run lang. And then if you notice the traditional ritual aid in here, we'll do some exercise sa Among Bandila by Tomas Baguio and Dalagang Filipinhon by Vicente Barriga. So you will find the 3 poems actually in the handout. That's why I wanted to mark American period, so you will not have to tuyok-tuyok. Alright, so we're not officially starting yet. We settled down. Of course, the lecture part is important. It would take me like one meeting, or depending, if it's an hour class, then it would be 2 meetings, or 1 hour, 1 hour and a half class, and then probably a lecture of 1 session. Just to introduce the period, social historical context, maybe that's even another session. And then one period or one session where I introduce katong mga sinalefa, diaresis, the rules, no, versus mayor versus minor. I really needed to give you a handout, kung siya na-upload sa original handout, of the rules. And that's when I introduced the poems. Which is another session. Just to make us understand how they really tried. I mentioned earlier, they were very concerned with making it right, putting the right form and format. So, just to understand how they labored over the form, I asked my students to do this exercise. So, as a sample, can we take a look at Hikalimtan? You have your copy of Hikalimtan. Tingali. The persona here is definitely, pwede ba yung male or female? Pwede female, no? Pwede na kayo, uy, pwede na kayo. Normally at that time, they would attribute this to a male voice. So tingali, mga yung voluntaryo sa pagbasa sa aking kalimtan. So perfect. Anyway, singang tanda yun. I love it. Thank you very much.
Hikalimtan, dili mahimo nga ikaw hikalimtan. Bisag maangkon ko ang imong kasilag. Samtang adunay dapit kining dughan, mapagsimbahan sa imong kaanyag. Dili sa nako nga ikaw ighibalag. Sa pag-usara ko ning kinabuhi, mapagsilutan sa dili paghalan. Ug sa paghandom kanimo pinili. Nganong maanyag ka ug mabihagon, kung daw buot man nga ikaw hikalimtan. Ngano nga ang imong katawa langit na, kung masuko man mapagahalaran. Nganong maambong ang imong pamayron, ug madanihon ang imong pananaw. Nganong kabunon ka sa kandiison, ug makapapas sa akong kahidlang. Sayod ang langit nga akong gihimo, ang mabaskugon nga pagpanlimbasog, sa pagsalikway ng dughan kanimo, hinikalimtan ang akong kaigo. Sayod ang langit nga buot kong mahanaw, sa handumanan ko ang imo ngalan. Basig mabawi ang nawagtang kalinaw, ug maoy mabalon sa akong lunganan. Ug kay nakaw ang akong tinuha, bisag yun sa naning kabubuton. Unsay buot mo, hakog nga bathala. Unsay buot mo, nga akong buhaton.
Thank you. Of course, it continues, but we stop there for our use. As mentioned over there, it appeared several times, this poem, in several publications. And it's memorized by a whole generation one generation of Cebuano readers. Pagusara, which is the second poem by Ranudo, was published, but the name of the Ranudo's name was not. It wasn't shown. Ranudo wrote it, but La Epoca ran a contest kung makaila sila kung kinsay writer. But that's how much they imbibed Ranudo's poetry that many people really immediately recognized Ranudo Gili. So he kalimtan. What I'd like to point out here is how Hikalintan achieved near perfection what Villarino and Osorio really wanted to say is a good kind of poem. And so if I may, if you look at stanzas 3, 4, and 5, the second column there would actually tell you the number of syllables. And the third column would tell you the rhyme scheme. He has achieved almost kind of thorough consistency of rhyme scheme and measure. The 11 syllables, if you remember, is the verbo endecasílabo. So also, because you don't have the time, you can check it out yourself how Ranudo has really kept this poem, the structure of the poem, really streamlined. Since it's verbo endecasílabo, is it verso mayor or verso menor? So you can look at your 2-page. That's the purpose. So in a class, I gave them that as laying the foundation. But in the next session, when you have the poem, muna na yun sila mag-dissect na sila in terms of the precepts given by Osorio and Villarino. So they would identify, is it verso arte menor or arte mayor? Mayor. Okay. Diba, mayor is 9 to 14 syllables. In terms of measure, I already told you that it's verso endecasílabo, which means it's an 11-syllable. Each line is 11 syllable. But you can also note, is it consistent? 11 lines. Where is the inconsistency if it's inconsistent? Okay, so. The third stanza, dili kaayo, but at least symmetric gyapon siya, 11, 12, 12, 11. But stanzas 4 and 5, if you want to challenge me, ihapa na diha, gusto ka, and you'd see the perfect niya. And there are other stanzas where he perfects the stanza, no? The structure of the stanza. And in terms of rhyme scheme, sorrows at kaayo siya. And that's why it's held, a generation of Cebuano readers see it as a valuable poem because it's a template, it became a template. But of course, we can talk about other things, other points there, like stanza, we mentioned that, poetic license, imagery and symbolism, and then figures of speech, which again, because we lack time, I will not have to go through I know you know these things. Right. So I mentioned it's a male voice, no? So it's addressing somebody. Who is being addressed? Right. The muse, the beloved. I like the word beloved, no? Right. What is the aspiration of the I here? What is the desire of the I? The person speaking, the persona. What is the desire of the persona? To adore, expressing of adoration. But why hikalimtan? He cannot dare. And in fact, in the process, he tries to. But the more he tries to, the more he cannot. No? So, bottom line, he is the original Hugotero, actually. The grand lolo of Hugotero. If you look at the second page, you will find 2 stanzas separated from the rests. Correct? Why do you think that is isolated from the rest of the stanzas with the line?